welcome to my channel. This is Chanel with Java Devotions, and today's video is a little bit different. As you can see, I'm outside in my backyard, and the reason I came out here today is because I wanted to do a little bit more of a heart-to-heart type of chat, of a scenario that I had to deal with personally. We're chatting with many of you. You also had to deal with personally. So I figured if I had to deal with it and a few other people had to deal with it, it's probably something that should be addressed, just to give us all a little bit more clarity on when we hear words of God concerning marriage or anything like that. So first of all, thank you for the new subscribers. And because this is more of a heart-to-heart, we're definitely probably going to have a further discussion on it. And if you have any ideas or comments, definitely leave them down below and we'll talk about it further. So one of the things that I wanted to address when it comes to marriage and the promise of marriage, and if the Lord has revealed to you a certain someone that's supposed to be your future spouse, either whether that be a wife or a husband, and things can be a little bit dicey when you're dealing with people's wills and their obedience to God's wills. So with that being said, I kind of wanted to separate or put into a different category God's promise and God's plans. So God's promises are eternal, they're everlasting. If He says something is going to happen, it's going to happen. He will find a way to get it done. So for example, like that, when God told Abraham 400 years ahead of time that He was going to lead his children that he hasn't even seen yet out of Egypt into their own land, the land that He told Abraham to look around and see. When He gave also Abraham and Sarah the promise of having a baby, He said it was going to happen. So that's God's promise, right? Then you have God's plans. God's plans are fluid, just like our plans are fluid, because a lot of times God's plans are dependent on our obedience. And if we don't obey right away, then God in His sovereignty has backup plans upon backup plans upon backup plans, just like we do. You know, if we have a goal in life and we want to get it done and it doesn't happen according to the first plan, we don't necessarily give up. We just go to plan B, C, D, E, whatever it is we need to do until we get that goal accomplished. So with that being said, I would say in my life, there was a period of time where I definitely had a confirmation, a word and a confirmation that God had a particular man picked out for me. And even the man felt he had confirmation that we were indeed to be wed. But here's the funny thing about that. Sometimes, well, not sometimes, like I said, God's plans are dependent on our obedience. And if someone is not obedient, it doesn't mean that God's promise for marriage is now mute. It just means God's going to go to a different plan to get His promise to you fulfilled. So what you don't want to do is that if God gave you a promise for marriage and for a particular person, and you're having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years or more go by and nothing is happening, then more than likely that person is not walking in obedience. And just because that person is not walking in obedience doesn't mean that God's promise of marriage is not going to happen. It means He will raise up another to take that person's place so that His promise will be fulfilled. So a great example of this would be in Esther. So if you recall, God was going to deliver the people of Israel from the hands of Haman. And Mordecai told Esther to go to the king because she was in a position to go to the king and plead for the lives of her people. And Esther was feeling extra cute and decided that no, she was not going to put her life on the line for her people, because I guess she was just in that palace just a little bit too long and forgot where she came from for a little bit. So Mordecai had to let her know that, whether or not she decided she was going to be obedient and get on board with God's plan, it wasn't going to stop God's promise for deliverance. So whether it was going to be through her or whether it was going to be through someone else, God will have his promise fulfilled. So this is why it's really important to always remember that the source of the marriage is coming from God himself. The marriage is not dependent on whether this person chooses to be obedient. It's not dependent on them. The marriage is dependent on the unchanging, everlasting Alpha and Omega God. And because the promise is dependent on God and his character, whether that woman decides she's going to obey or not does not matter. God will get it done, and he will raise up someone else to take his or her place. So, if you need to move on and cry and grieve a little bit, that's fine. But just like when the Lord told the Israelites that it's time to stop grieving over Moses and move on with Joshua, then we need to do the same exact thing, because the promise will be fulfilled. Whether it's through that person or not, it does not matter. The promise is coming from God. And he will find someone who you two will fit each other, you will complement each other, and you both will be able to do the work of the kingdom together. And at the end of the day, you want to be with someone who's going to obey and listen to the voice of the Lord anyway, right? That's the whole goal. So let me know what you think. If you had any experiences in that area, if you haven't, questions, comments, prayer requests, definitely leave them below. Don't forget to like and share and subscribe. And until next time, have a great one. Bye-bye.